We're joined now by Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang, a former tech entrepreneur campaigning live from Iowa. We are 31 days now from those caucuses, and he's also been making headlines this week with the fundraising haul. Take a look at how Tulsi Gabbard, Cory Booker, members of Congress running for president, have brought in less than $10 million here in the last quarter, while Yang raising over $16 million, the same ballpark, many say, with candidates like Warren, Biden, and Buttigieg. He's also making news today, taking on the president's strike on Iran, saying it highlights the need to get Trump out of office. We need better decision-making in the White House that does not escalate violence. Welcome back, Andrew Yang on the beat. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ari. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and Happy New Year to the folks I see behind you, a campaign tradition. But we, of course, begin with the very serious foreign policy standoff. You are critical of what the president did. What would you, as president, do different?
Well, I never would have pulled out of the multilateral nuclear agreement with Iran that ended up causing all of these provocations that have now been escalating to a point where we're at the brink of war. We need to head the opposite direction. The vast majority of Americans want nothing to do with a war in Iran, and I would lead us back from the brink and reinvest in diplomacy to try and get tensions under control in the region.
What if that doesn't work? What if, as the folks in this administration say, and frankly, as many in the last administration said, although they did ultimately reach a kind of deal, that Iran does sponsor terror, that it does sow discord in the region, and it does work against U.S. interests, and that if that doesn't work, then what?
Well, we've had a series of escalating provocations. We need to keep them in line, where if Iran does something problematic, we need to let them know that that's not something we'll accept, but you don't do something that's going to precipitate a larger scale armed conflict. We've been in a constant state of warfare for the last 19 years, Ari, and that's not the will of the American people. That's not the way it was drawn up in the Constitution. It's an act of Congress to declare war. That's where we need to head back as a country. I would repeal the AUMF and restore Congress's historical power to make these kinds of military decisions.
You were talking about repealing the authorization that was used leading into Afghanistan, and that some say they could have tried to apply elsewhere. Because I want to hit a range of topics with you, you're out in Iowa. What's the biggest issue you hear voters care about there?
Well, here in Iowa, they care about the fact that 30% of their stores and malls are closing forever. Their kids' future looks more insecure than ever before. We need to rewrite the rules of the 21st century economy to work for us, to work for our families, to work for the next generation. And my message to people here in Iowa is that if it's not working for you, it's not working, and we have to change it. That's one reason why we're growing and growing when other campaigns are pulling back.
Does that mean, when you say change it, does that mean change the way the economy works, change the rules, change the system? Or does that also mean change what people are doing to get in and out of the job market? Because one of your competitors, Joe Biden, was talking about that balance. I'll just play it for you. Take a listen.
Anybody who could go down 300 to 3,000 feet in a mine sure and hell can learn how to program as well. Anybody who can throw coal into a furnace can learn how to program, for God's sake.
Does he have that right?
He does not. I get along with Joe very well, but suggesting that former coal miners learn to code is not productive at all, and it doesn't line up with the reality that we all experience. The fact is that coding is like learning a foreign language that you have to become expert in. And that's not a realistic recommendation for millions of Americans. Instead, we have to stop confusing economic value and human value and put a dividend in place where we can all share in the incredible gains of the 21st century economy. That goes for the miners that Joe was referencing, that goes for the manufacturing workers here in Iowa, that goes for all of us. That's the centerpiece of my campaign, and that's, again, why we're growing and poised to make history next month.
Does that mean that you think basically Vice President Biden doesn't understand much of the way the economy works now in technology, that he said that because he thinks it sounds good, and you're saying that it's a fundamental misunderstanding that coding is a language that basically is more likely to be pursued in earlier education?
Well, one of the things I've said, Ari, is that someone who suggests that coal miners become coders is generally neither of those things. If you look at the numbers, 8% of Americans work in STEM fields, 92% do not. It is not realistic to say to 92% of Americans to somehow shoehorn themselves into the 8%. We have to think much, much bigger about what the jobs of the future look like, not based upon a narrow conception of market value, but instead what our actual needs and desires and values are in our communities.
And you've hit on this interview, and we mentioned it. You have raised a lot more than other people who started out politically potentially ahead, in that they'd run for office before, that they're known. I think some of our viewers might know some of these senators or these other folks to the left of you in this chart more than you. What exactly are you saying your 16 million shows here? And does that mean in your mind there's no way you'd have to drop out in the first several states no matter what happens? Are you in this to the convention? What does it mean tangibly?
We are going to have the resources to fight all the way through the spring, all through the primary season. And we're growing because we've had a very clear vision from day one. We see the real problems that got Donald Trump elected, the fact that we blasted away millions of manufacturing jobs in the swing states, and now we're doing the same thing to millions of retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, eventually truck driving jobs. And we have real solutions that will help move the country forward. So this is why the $16.5 million is just the beginning for our campaign.
Yeah.
We're going to grow and grow, and we're going to peak right when the voting starts.
And you know what the last question is, Andrew? You've been on this show before. You know we throw some curveballs in here, right?
Sure.
What is your New Year's resolution, sir?
My New Year's resolution is to become President-elect of the United States of America.
We already knew that about you. Do you have any other New Year's resolutions that an actual normal human would have?
The other thing is to cut down on all of the snacks in the car, because I get in there and my team's really good. They have munchies there, and I've been indulging a little bit too much.
What's your favorite snack? And I've worked out in Iowa. I even worked out in the Iowa caucus, if you go back far enough. There is great fried items, the crab rangoon and the fried water. Do you have a favorite fried Iowa food yet?
I love the turkey legs here in Iowa. Like, the pork products are delicious, but it's not like those are waiting for me in the car. When I get in the car, it's Kind Bars, Skinny Pop, Bark Thins. But I've been indulging a little bit too much.
The Kind Bar is just a fancy Snickers, but we could get into that debate some other time. We covered a lot of the serious policies, some of where your campaign is headed, and some of the lighter stuff as we try to do around here. I really appreciate your time, making time on the campaign trail, Andrew.
Thank you, Ari. We'll see you soon in the new year. We're going all the way.
Okay, yes, sir. Andrew Yang, thank you very much.
Put the money in our hands. Put the money in our hands. Put the money in our hands.
Can we afford it? Yes. Will it cause inflation? No. Is it awesome? Yes. Is anyone trying to make it happen? Yeah, that guy.